Hello, everyone. Maybe we are still waiting for some people, but we could already start with the introduction if you all agree.
Yep.
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining today's session on the topic of our methodology, Semantic Social Network Analysis, ahead of the Horizon Europe program. I'm Marina Batinic, the research coordinator at EdgeRiders. And today I will just give you a short introduction on why we are doing this event and what we expect to come out of it. Some of you already know us, but if this is your first encounter with EdgeRiders, I would start with saying that we are a community of more than 6,000 change makers from all over the world who are part of our online platform where we host large online conversations. Our research network unit is the one leading research projects, most of them funded under Horizon 2020 program. We are a small but dedicated team, having an important track record in using the methodology that you will discover today across very different topics. You can find out more about our past and ongoing projects on the dedicated website that I'm going to share here in the chat with you. Second, all right. So this is the website where you have more structured information on what is happening at our research network unit. And these projects in which we use the SSNA allow us to test different approaches, improve, and further develop the methodology itself. So if you'd like to know more about EdgeRiders as an organization as a whole, so you can visit this website where you can really find out more broadly what EdgeRiders is. So again, a link in the chat. In the context of Horizon Europe program, although the calls are still not officially published, we have used the draft work programs to map the topics of our interest, those that require strong citizen engagement, which there are quite many across clusters. And we would actually like this event to be a conversation starter with you. So it's important to mention that we are not leading any proposals on our own, as we do not have the capacity to do so, but we are quite dedicated into helping the principal investigators develop their own proposals, and we are therefore looking for consortia to join. So today we are not really going to go into details in the Horizon Europe work program. We are rather going to show you what we can do for many of these calls. So whether you are building a consortium or for any of these calls which are coming up or outside of the EU funding frameworks, we would like this event to inspire you. And we would like to offer what we do to strengthen your project and bring added value to your proposals to create a real impact at the community and the policy-making levels. So on today's agenda that you see on your screen, we have a formal presentation, which is led by our research director and one of the co-founders of EdgeRiders, Alberto, together with one of our directors and tech experts, Hugi Asgeirsson, who will make a GraphRider demonstration for you. So we will then open the floor for discussion, as we would like to get your feedback, but also give you the opportunity to ask any questions. I would like to also encourage you to use the chat during the presentation, and then we can address your comments right after. One final note, we are recording the presentation, just this first 30 minutes of the event, because we would also like to make it available later for those who were not able to join us today. So I hope you will enjoy it. I will now stop sharing my screen and give the floor to Alberto. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. Screen sharing time for me, which would be this. And here we go. So thanks to all of you for being here. And this presentation is a small milestone on a very long journey that began for me personally at the end of the 2000s, when I became involved with the research group
Alberto.
Typical.
Okay, now.
Right, sorry about that. Usual Zoom stuff. So, thanks Marina for the introduction. Thanks to all of you. This presentation is a small milestone on a very long journey. For me personally, it began at the end of the 2000s when I became involved with a research group that was doing economics and social sciences from a complex systems perspective. And these guys were fascinating because it seemed to me that they had a different way to know, to find out the truth from that of run-of-the-mill economists like I was at the time. And that started a journey into ethnography, and for me even more deeply into network science, which is how I personally get here today. So, qualitative analysis is where we start. Qualitative analysis is used to study human interaction and behavior, and the worldviews, culture. It ensures that the research categories emerge from the lived experience of the human communities that are being studied. So in a sense, it returns collective points of view. It's inherently participatory, how a certain group perceives an issue or a set of issues. It is a structured form of deep listening. And so unlike the quantitative researcher, which is more my background, who formulates a hypothesis and then tests it through a predefined protocol, qualitative researchers are trained to be open to novelty. So they scan the field for anything that could be relevant. And the work is in a way closer to that of a detective or the healer than to that of experimental physicist. Anything could potentially be evidence, statistical information, a detailed interview, the starting of a new fashion, a conversation between two strangers in a market. As a consequence, good anthropologists armed with qualitative analysis make outstanding field researchers. They detect clues they were not necessarily looking for, and they follow them to sometimes unveil large cultural structures that had previously been invisible. Formally, qualitative analysis deals with non-numerical data, interview transcriptions, field notes from participant observation, diaries, but also things like posts on online fora, images, audio and video recordings. Synthesizing all these data can be challenging because human short-term memory is limited. My colleagues and I have been working on a method to make this process of synthesis easier, more scalable and more accountable. And as Marina anticipated, we call it Semantic Social Network Analysis, or SSNA. And it combines basically three techniques. The first one is derived from the anthropology lineage. It's called ethnographic coding. The second one consists in storing the coded data according to a structured data model, which allows to represent the whole data set in the same study as a graph. And the third one, which is inherited from network science, consists in applying techniques to process, reduce, and analyze those graphs. So this combo, in a way, allows for coherent handling of large quantities of qualitative data and unlocks qualitative research at a larger scale than before was possible. So to give you an idea, ethnography journals routinely publish studies with 6 to 20 informants. And we already processed datasets at a scale of over the 300 informants and the 4,000 contributions, and are convinced that achieving the scale of the thousands of informants is perfectly possible with the method we already have. And the technology, because SSNA is supported by a stack of software we have been developing over the past few years. This makes the method much more efficient, and Hugi Asgeirsson, my colleague, is going to tell you more about it. To give an example of the sort of work that SSNA we believe makes possible, consider Eurobarometer. So Eurobarometer is a large array of surveys, some are periodical, some are more occasional, and they are meant to provide the institutions of the European Union with a big picture view of how Europeans perceive different issues affecting their lives. So the method employed is simple. They phone a random sample of a population in each member state, and they ask everybody to report on a 5-point Likert scale their sentiment in response to a prompt. For example, the prompt could be immigration of people from EU other EU member states. And so how do you feel about that? Very positive, very negative, somewhere in between. This method has obvious drawbacks. For one, it doesn't tell the reader what it is that drives the response. So imagine you are very negative about that. Are you negative because you fear the newcomers' competition of the job market? Are you worried because you fear the dilution and disappearance of the ancestral culture of your country or region? These are different worries, they require different policy responses, but the survey can't tell which is which. And another obvious problem is that respondents can only answer questions that have been asked. So that means that Eurobarometer is by design blind to novelty. But on the other hand, surveys like Eurobarometer have a very important advantage, which is that they scale very well. Once the questionnaire is designed, the data processing infrastructure is in place, you can add extra respondents pretty easily and cheaply. And so you can also aggregate answers very well because they're just numbers from 1 to 5, and the results can be compared and aggregated across different countries. So that's their advantage. So now consider what that would look like if it was done with a qualitative, quantitative network-based system like SSNA. So in each country you would have a large, open, ongoing forum conversation, maybe online, maybe offline, and this would take the place of the campaigns where you phone people. So the conversation will be ongoing. And open in this context means that anybody can join the conversation, and the data generated by the conversation are themselves open. So this first feature provides legitimacy, and the second one makes sure that the data can be legally reused, and that provides cost effectiveness. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. So then there will be a data model that supports intercoder reliability. So there's a lot of data. You will code it in a reliable way across the different conversations happening in the different countries. So researchers would know that a conversation happening, say, in French among Belgian participants on something like public spaces is really about the same idea of public spaces that is contemporarily being discussed in German in the Austrian forum. So the model enables both analysis at the country level and their aggregation to the European level. So that takes care of coverage. Instead of interviewers, you would probably have more things like community managers. They would ask a collective, rather than each individual, open-ended questions. So rather than how do you feel about issue X, what it is you're most worried about and why. And so that would make sure that the study is open to novelty, to unknown unknowns, and it would make results more precise because they encode information on the reasons that lead participants to the convictions that they hold. Community managers also would encourage and reward the experience of the sharing of experiential data, rather than the vouching of abstract opinions. And this corrects some of the biases affecting surveys like social desirability bias. Anthropologists like to say people don't always do what they say or say what they do. So you ask them very concrete questions and you start conversations on those. The ongoing nature of the conversation provides a deep ongoing engagement that ethnography requires to ensure depth. And the coding would be contemporary with the conversation, so that ensures timeliness. Imagine something that nobody had foreseen happens. The COVID pandemic would be an example. We will know what Europeans think about the COVID pandemic in the second year. Eurobarometer doesn't catch it in the first year because nobody thought of including that question in the survey. Instead, here, when something happens, you can have almost a real-time response, which takes care of timeliness. And finally, you can reuse this data. So imagine that you find a conversation on how a group of parents of diabetic children using digital tools hacked a blood glucose monitor to allow a real-time reporting of a glucose level in their children's blood when the children are out of the home. That would give the children more freedom. So that's why these parents did it. This is a real example, by the way. So the purpose of operation was that, and the parents would discuss how they did it and why they did it and what results they had. So a story like this could in principle be a part of several studies, not one. A study on healthcare, a study on open source technology, a study on parenting, and so on. There is no reason why the testimony of a parent in this situation should not be used more than once. So this feature adds cost efficiency to social semantic network analysis. And when all of this works, it looks really like collective intelligence in action. This visualization shows you the growth of the online forum of one of our projects. Participants are represented by these little pawn-like entities. They post their points of view in reply to each other, and you create those tree-like structures of content where people are replying. Each contribution is a reply to somebody else. And on the basis of their initial findings, then ethnographers add their annotations, which are represented as yellow nodes in the network. And so then they just keep asking more questions, and these questions generate new answers, so the corpus grows iteratively. Let us take now a closer look at how this whole process works. I will use the example where the data come from an online forum. This is the weapon of choice for edge riders. We grew out of an online forum, essentially. It's the one we know best. With minor modification, the process would work as well with almost any kind of data source, interview transcripts, video recordings, media articles, you name it. So this you see on the screen now is a typical thread on the Edge Riders forum, where we host conversations when we use as research data. As you can see, this one has 76 posts spread over a year and a half of conversation. There are many like this in any given study. So the first step consists in ethnographic coding, which is the process of highlighting within each post of the thread meaningful content and associating the highlighted text to one or more ethnographic codes. A code is a single word or a short sentence pointing to an entity that has meaning in the culture of the community being studied. In this example, the second sentence is associated to collapsing social spaces, privacy, social media, and diversifying tool sets. And we do this with a piece of software we call Open Ethnographer. Unlike any other software for ethnographic coding, OpenEthno is integrated with the forum platform, so the data live in the cloud. So give me a second because I think my colleagues are trying to reach me. Sorry about that, but this is, no, all good, fantastic. And here we go again. So the association between code and the snippet of text is stored in a database object called an annotation, and the same post can have multiple ones. So here you can see an annotation on the screen. Codes themselves are also stored in the database. So ethnographers maintain an ontology of codes relevant to each study. And codes can be renamed, split, and merged as the study progresses. So the entry for each code contains a description, so what we mean, translations in their languages relevant to the study. In this case, you can see Polish and Czech, and its ancestry or parent codes. For example, social media that you see here, like mass media, is a child of media. And then ethnographers have something called a codebook, which is a compendium of all codes used in the study. In Open Ethnographer, the codebook can be produced on the fly by exporting the codes used in your study. If that's a deliverable, you can generate an updated version of it in minutes. So you have your text and ethnographic coding happens. And the contribution of the person on the left in our example contains codes 1, 2, 3, 4. And since the person was presumably trying to make an organic point, and she needed all these 4 concepts, we can infer that she thinks these codes are all related to each other. They're all associated. The person on the right then replies to the person on the left, and after coding we can see that her contribution associates codes 1, 2, 5 and 6. So we interpret co-occurrence of codes on the same post or unit of content as association. And we can combine these associations in patterns like you can see here. The graphs that are forming are maps of associations between concepts. That's the same idea as you would get if you gave someone a word, like psychologists sometimes do, or psychiatrists, and ask them to think of another word that the first one brings to mind. But here's the trick, that you can build then a graph that encodes the collective map of associations. Here seen for this collective of only 2 people. Notice that both have associated code 1 and 2 in their respective contributions. And so what that means is that we can replace the 2 edges connecting code 1 and 2 with a single one stronger. So in sum, these 2 people have identified 6 important concepts of or codes and 11 connections across them. And of these, one, the one between codes 1 and 2, is stronger than the other. This is what makes semantic social network analysis a partially quantitative method, because the codes that have been identified qualitatively through normal ethnographic analysis, but the topology and the strength of their connection graphs are quantitative. The quantitative dimension is important if you want to operate at a kind of scale or above. A typical SSNA study for now has a few hundreds of participants in the online conversation. They contribute maybe 3,000–4,000 posts. And after coding, these result in very large networks with 1,000 or more codes and 50 to 150,000 co-occurrences. So these networks are too large and dense and therefore uninterpretable by human analysts. So this is a product about the next generation internet. The network has 1,100 codes connected by 40,000 edges. It's just not readable at all. But the quantitative approach allows us to select in an accountable and consistent way which codes and connections are the most important ones. So in this case, I have done 2 things on the previous graph. I have filtered discarding all the edges where the number of co-occurrences was lower than 14. And then I color-coded the remaining edges according to how many co-occurrences, how many posts any 2 codes co-occurred in. So brighter red means more co-occurrences. This has substantially reduced the network because 70% of the codes and over 95% of the edges are gone. And of those that remain, we can now clearly see the strongest ones and analyze them. So for example, even just by looking at this, you can see that there is a partially hidden community of nodes on the right, which is a kind of island, and it's centered around care. In the center, there is a larger community of more technology-related codes, and you can see the business models and others are somehow central. They connect with things like discrimination and government failure, and there is some kind of trouble happening there. And to the left, you see a different cluster with COVID-19 and work sphere and co-living and social distancing. So you can imagine this is a discussion on how internet tools are used to react to the COVID pandemic that prevents people from going to work. And of course, an experienced ethnographer can get much more information by going in and reading the posts and making a detailed analysis. But this is a way to zoom in and out and to start from this large mass of connections and get what the most relevant ones are for the study. The collective and social nature data of the data allow for different criteria to measure the strength of the association. Here we see the same network as before twice. You've already seen the graph on the left, the redder edges show the associations that appear on the highest numbers of posts. So more posts, more red. We interpret this as association intensity. So people are discussing and these associations come up a lot in different contexts. They keep being associated. Something's up. On the right, the greener edges show the edges that appear in the contributions of the highest number of different people. So we interpret this as breadth of agreement about the association in this community. It's a kind of democracy, one man, one vote kind of thing. So these are associations that are endorsed by several different people. So the two types of associations are correlated, but not the same. So some connections are broadly agreed upon, but not very much debated. Others are debated very, very intensely, but by relatively small numbers of people. Of course, we can also double filter. We can construct composite indices that will show the associations that are strong in both dimensions. It depends on the study. But the point is the data are malleable. We can work with them. We can filter them in as many ways as we want. And over the years, we have found that this data model is pretty powerful and flexible. For example, this is a heavily filtered codes co-occurrence network from a different study, one on populism in Eastern Europe. And the debate here happens in 4. And the principal investigator was curious to determine whether there was a different perception of the issue across the different languages. So we color-coded the edges by language of the original post. Red is Czech, green is English, blue is Polish, and there's a little bit of orange to the left for Serbian. And the answer to the principal investigator's question is visually obvious. So many of the most important codes are indeed shared across all the debates. They are shown in gray. But most of the highest intensity edges are monolingual and clustered. So you can see some red and orange in the blue. There are some bordering zones, but all in all, there is quite some separation. So the answer is yes. The issue is indeed perceived differently by the speakers of different languages. If you wanted to go mathematical about this, you could even measure how different they are. You could use things like Jacquard indexes or cosine distances between the adjacency matrices of the different networks in the different languages. But already like this, you have your answer. The same data also help us to build the social network of a conversation behind each study. Who's talking to whom? In these networks that now, differently to the ones that I showed you so far, the nodes represent people, the edges represent direct interaction. So Alice is connected to Bob when she writes a reply to one of Bob's posts. And so what we learn from a representation like this is the topology of the social network, and it would allow to see us if there were a balkanization across our participants, then we would see islands of disconnected interactions, people that are really in groups and the groups are not talking to each other. This is not what we see here. But it also allows us to see the hubs of a conversation. See on the yellow side, there's quite some guys that have a lot of connections. It shows us dense clusters of people are all talking to each other. There is one to the northeast in blue. And this particular network, by the way, represents 2 studies, color-coded by different study. And it is nice to see that most people are specialists. They stay in one of the studies. But then there are some of them shown in gray that participate in both. And they act as, they can report information and even invite people from one study to the next. Okay, I want to conclude my part of the presentation by reflecting on 2 important extra benefits of this data approach to qualitative analysis. The first is acquiring informed consent to participating in research. Normally, this is done by having participants sign forms. That's formally correct, but many people have a rather casual attitude to forms because everybody hates forms. And so is this consent really informed? To which extent? Hard to say. The online version of that is even worse. You tick a box saying, I accept terms and conditions, and that really doesn't mean much. So what we do instead is this. We've written a little module for our online platform called an informed consent funnel. What it does is it warns people when they join that we use their content for research, we explain what the research is about, and ask people questions to make sure they understand what they have read. If they do not answer the question correctly, the platform does not let them post. This is not a complete solution because it does not cover data gathered on the field like participant observation notes, but it does go part of the way, and it keeps our attention on the issue of ethical research, which is appreciated by reviewers of research proposals in our experience. And the second benefit is this, that this approach makes it natural to share with the scientific community not only our results, our papers, but our data, I am an open data activist in my spare time, so I'm passionate about this. And the European Union mandates the sharing of research data in open format in every project it funds, which in my opinion is really good. So we have written scripts that export our corpora, the corpora of our studies, in the form of structured data, and then we publish them with good documentation on Zenodo. Zenodo is CERN's repository of research data and other material, and we like it because it is robust, likely to last a long time because it is CERN. It hosts the datasets generated by the Large Hadron Collider, and no one wants to lose those. It's also integrated with something called OpenAIRE, which is the European Commission's network of repositories. That means for you that anything you share on Zenodo is automatically made available to the viewer, so they can track your progress. And as an added benefit, our datasets seem to attract a lot of attention. We get thousands of downloads, which makes these datasets far and away the most downloaded outputs for the respective project. It's good for your dissemination, and it gives us hope for the future of data-based ethnography. Concluding, what is this good for? We think it's good for anything participatory, really, because that's a method for listening. It's a method for deep listening at scale. So research, we've talked about this, but things like stakeholder dialogue, where you could kind of see where different stakeholders make the same associations. What kind of concepts are shared and connection between concepts are shared across stakeholders. Citizen engagement also would be good. You ask open-ended questions. How do you feel about this initiative, this project, this infrastructure being built in your community? And again, being open to novelty would allow to see that there are maybe benefits or problems that had not been foreseen by the planners. In principle, this would map well to a support action, coordination and support action in European funded research, because after all, one goal of this type of action is to coordinate and also get to a shared worldview across a research community. So we could map that in principle using social semantic network analysis. I'm done with for now. I'm passing it on to Hugi, and let me know if you have any questions after Hugi is done.
Thank you, Alberto. And indeed, I'll be taking over, sharing my screen. And is everything working as it should now?
Yes.
Great. All right. So what I'm going to be talking about now, following up on Alberto, is our technology stack, and really more about how we do these things and what makes us ready to be able to do them in any research project that might be coming up. So the layers of the EdgeWriters technology stack are really based around the three different phases of what we do. The first phase of that is engagement, which is drawing people into the conversation and making sure that we have any content to code and understand and do analysis of. The second phase of what we do is observation, and that is what Alberto was talking about before, where we have ethnographers, researchers going through those posts and annotating them with the concepts that they find. And that is another layer of our tech stack. And then we have a third layer of our tech stack, which is essentially interactive versions of those graphs that Alberto was showing, basically what allows us to gain insight of the collective intelligence of the conversations or communities as a whole that we engage with. There are some hallmarks of our tech stack that are important to get out of the way. It's all open source. This is important for us for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that it allows us to have everything self-hosted. We control and understand all the code while we can still use state-of-the-art technology that is built collaboratively with people around the world. So we get sort of best of both worlds there. Everything is, as I said, self-hosted. We control the servers. We know where all our data is. And it is, of course, GDPR compliant, and we ensure ethical consent on all levels of data collection and engagement. So starting out with how we engage people, it's actually a very wide methodology that we use. We've built different engagement engines or different engagement layers. This screenshot here is from one of those where we build custom websites that integrate with our online platform. We can add content to those, like events that people can attend or sign up for, proposals for things that they want to do. We can syndicate feeds of especially interesting content from our platform onto these sites. And essentially, the content that is being syndicated there or shown there is just this. It's the same as you can see on our platform. And in this case, this event here is the event that is being shown here on the screen. And it's the same, it syncs automatically. It's just two different ways to show the same thing. And one benefit of doing this is that an RSVP to an event does not only end up in some obscure inbox somewhere, it actually becomes a social event. What do I mean by that? I mean that when someone signs up to the event that is a part of our engagement, that sign up in and of itself becomes a post and a thread in our forum. So that sign up can actually be something that contains content that we can then code and analyze as part of the conversation, also to engage people in further conversation. So for example, here's a hackathon that we had a few weeks ago. This is how it looks when you sign up for that. You go in, you say that you want to participate, and this form in and of itself also then ensures the ethical consent, of course, because it creates a user for you on the platform, and it posts your reply as a reply on the platform, and it informs you that it's doing so. So you write your reply here when you say, I want to attend in this event, and you might answer some other questions. This is completely customizable, of course. And then you answer the same consent question as you do when you sign up on our platform. So you see that these are really different ways to enter the platform from different perspectives. And that is important because different people, different contexts require different onboarding. And this is an example of how these answers become a piece of the conversation. So here, Marco B has signed up for the platform through one of these forms. This is his first post, which is answers to those forms. And Alberto here can onboard Marco to the event by just tagging him then in his reply and starting a conversation. So this is very different from when you just sign up through a normal sign up link, and then basically you hear nothing but emails and then get to some sort of meeting. We can also do it the other way around. So especially rich and interesting content on our platform can be syndicated to essentially generate a custom bespoke website based on that content. So here, for example, we have a project on science fiction economics, and Yuznyaya has written here a very interesting post, which we find as interesting enough that we want to syndicate it as a part of the website. When Yuznyaya updates his post because he wants to make some changes, the website updates automatically as well. So this is completely dynamic. We can then use that website to rope people into the conversation further, creating a feedback loop of engagement. Here's an example of where we did an Ask Me Anything format with somebody who had done some very interesting things around algorithmic decision-making systems and suing the EU for government use of those. And this is where we get to our second layer of the technology stack. Because here, what you'll see is that you have these users, they make these posts. These posts can become presentation websites. And succinctly, those presentation websites prompt more users to join, creates a feedback loop like this. And as you see here, they can also join the conversation through form responses or event RSVPs, and all this goes through the consent funnel. But then once we have these posts, those are being read by researchers first live on the platform as they come in. The researchers can also engage in the conversations themselves and ask follow-up questions. And then, as Alberto was talking about, we have what I call our observation layer of the tech stack. And Alberto went through this a little bit in his presentation. Basically, we've built our own bespoke annotation ethnography software. I know from working with ethnographers that we've actually built something that works more efficiently and is better than a lot of annotation and ethnography software on the market today. So ethnographers are often very happy about working with this. Researchers often like the system a lot. It's pretty easy to use and very efficient in how you code and annotate and so on. And what it really excels at is that it allows different ethnographers and researchers to share the same code book, to share the same references, to be able to collectively annotate content using the same ontology. Of course, our systems are open to be able to integrate your own custom solutions to, and we can also do that in research projects. This is an example of when we took the codebook for a particular project and we wanted to display that codebook as a website. And then you can just search for the codes and see the definitions. You can even filter so that you only see codes that have a minimum of number of co-occurrences with other codes. So it's really very open and possible to integrate with other systems or to build custom solutions based on it. So what we end up here is basically like this. You see these posts represented by the yellow scrolls here. The posts are annotated with annotations. Each annotation refers to a code in the ontology. And from those, you can generate, like Alberto said, code books and open data. And all this is built into the tech that we've created. Now, on the other end of the side, you have the researchers wanting to analyze and understand the content in the way that Alberto was referring to before. This here is an example of a subgraph of a few concepts. And really what I want to show next is the technology layer, the analysis layer that we've built. And I'm going to do something that's pretty scary. I'm going to do the stuntman equivalent of Zoom meetings, which is a live tech demo. So bear with me. I just find it to be a lot more exciting when things can go wrong. So this is the software that we built called GraphWriter. What I'm exploring and looking at now is a project we are working on for a Horizon 2020 project called Next Generation Internet Forward, in which we're part of that consortium. And we are hosting and engaging and generating a conversation around the next generation internet, currently with 317 users or participants. A total here of almost 4,000 pieces of content have been written by those participants. And a bit more than 1,000 codes have been used to annotate that content. So the ethnographers have identified over 1,000 individual concepts that they have written definitions for, and then applied systematically to the content. And it's been applied 5,730 times in 5,730 annotations. So the first thing we can notice here is that we can generate this sort of word cloud to get a little bit of an overview of the conversation. But the really interesting thing is really in here. So what you're seeing here is at the middle of this one, I'm looking at the code artificial intelligence. And I'm positioning that code in the middle of the graph where all of the edges here going out to other little red dots are codes that have been mentioned together with artificial intelligence. So remember what Alberto was saying, it means that encoding values in artificial intelligence have appeared together at least once. But this is a bit much. So I want to look at what the strongest connections are to artificial intelligence. And I can just sort of filter it down until I find it to be manageable to look at. And what I can see here is the strongest one is anthropomorphization, which is pretty interesting. That is referring to non-human things as human, which is linked here to artificial intelligence. But we also have it quite strongly linked to bias. So immediately we can start formulating some ideas about what this conversation is telling us about artificial intelligence linked to various other concepts. But this is, of course, not everything. Like Alberto showed you before, we can generate these graphs of all the codes and how they co-occur with each other. Now, this is very dense and very hard to read. So let's filter it down so that only edges are shown between codes that co-occur 4 times or more. There we go. Okay, so this is immediately a little bit easier to understand. And I want to put some labels on these nodes. And then I can basically start exploring how these different concepts fit together. And up here, I do find artificial intelligence. And I can see here how artificial intelligence sort of fits in to the network around it. And I can find here that here's bias and artificial intelligence sort of hanging out pretty close to each other. And bias is also connected to quite a lot of other things. Now, say that I wanted to understand not just that bias and artificial intelligence are co-occurring as codes, but I want to understand and figure out how they are occurring as codes. What are people saying when they are referring both to bias and to artificial intelligence at the same time? Then I can look at that edge between those two things. And I can see here who are the participants that have mentioned those two things together and what have they been saying. So if I go into this particular post, I can see here is someone, a user called Jay Noga, a Dutch guy working in Brussels. And I might want to find this very interesting and actually read this in context on the platform. I can very easily just click through and find that particular post. When I read this as a researcher, I might actually want to engage directly with Jay Noga to ask some follow-up questions or to maybe engage Jay Noga in another conversation. And of course, I can just do that here. The thread lives on for years and years after it's been posted. So it could even be picked up at a much later stage, hoping that Jay Noga is still around or being able to contact them. So what I want to show you now is that we can do even more advanced stuff than that. Because once we find things that are interesting, we might want to use those things that we've found as sort of a point of departure. So let's see here that we want to look at artificial intelligence and we want to understand how artificial intelligence relates to shifting responsibility. And in fact, we might even want to organize a special session that looks at that, inviting some particular people. So let's look at that. Actually, let's look at, artificial intelligence and shifting responsibility. I haven't looked at that before, so now I'm doing it live for the first time. So anything can happen. This is very exciting. So how do I do that? I just position it like this, and then I pick those two codes out like that. Whoops, didn't work. Yeah, just need to reload. Well, luckily, just so we're not wasting too much time because I need to reload, I accidentally did something here. It's coming back. No, let me just do this because I actually prepared some screenshots just in case I would mess up. It just happens. Here, if I look at, for example, pick out artificial intelligence and bias, I can then take those codes and I can see who are the participants who have engaged around those particular codes in conversation. So this means that I can, pick out these people, I can message them on the platform, and I can say, hey, we're organizing a seminar around artificial intelligence and bias. Would you be interested in being these sort of subject experts in that session? And of course, we can then use that to sort of explore further. We can take it as a point of departure, go further beyond. Okay, so that was a demonstration of what we do on our platform. Just gonna remind you of what we've gone through. We have a platform on which we engage participants through various means, either through event RSVPs or through form responses, or through them finding the platform through us posting about it on social media or through their friends. They come in there, they go through a consent funnel. So all of their material is cleared for research, of course, with the appropriate GDPR clearance as well. And researchers can engage on that platform, but then also engage in a coding backend where they make annotations to those posts and those materials. And the researchers can then gain insights and discoveries from that through the graphs and network science, which is, of course, something that we are good at looking into and using for reports. So I will stop there and move back to Marina.